All right. Well, welcome everyone. I'm so glad that you could join Chris and me, and all the others are joining from all over the world. I see you from everywhere. I love it. I had you turn on your cameras so I can see many of you. It's nice. It's always so lovely to see your faces because I think that's how we all communicate, through our face. It's like looking at the sunflowers. That's what I see. And this is the time of the year that the sunflowers are in Colorado, at least. They're really bright, enjoying the end of the summer light. So, and I truly hope you are all doing well enough. Okay. Maybe not be perfect. We're not going for perfection anyway, right? So we're just practicing what it is to show up every day to this moment, to this breath over and over and over. That seems to be in the maybe our manual right now. I feel that the Mercury retrograde has been giving us a brand new manual to work with, maybe rewriting of the old manual in some parts, but it's certainly we're getting new instructions as we go through. And I think what I feel is that really none of us really individually wholly understand what this instructions look like, because each of you has like different parts of the chapters or different, writing. And then we have to kind of come together and put it together and say, oh, you have that part. Oh, I need that part, that kind of thing. Like we were all given different pieces of the puzzle. And we decided to buy one of those most complicated puzzles, that have like 5,000 pieces that takes you 3 Christmases, with your family. And then your family members come and visit the next Christmas. Say, oh my gosh, you still have that still sitting right there on the card table. Yes, that's kind of how I feel. We all come to this table with different pieces and say, well, what about this one? What about that one? Because it feels like the world has been, blowing up into pieces, but it's still the world. There's a wholeness behind that. So we all have to go find those pieces. Might be in your pockets. So we're here to share that. It might got washed in your washing machine. So go look in your washing machine and see if you could find those pieces, because we all could use that. Could all use it. So welcome. And we wanted to get started. First of all, actually, Chris has a beautiful question to all of you that you can post it on the chat. So as people are trickling in, why don't we start with that question, Chris?
Yeah, the question that I have for everyone, this is something that I have asked in other settings, but it's so important right now at this time in the world, and with just the to counterbalance some of the heaviness that we tend to feel. So the question is, and please share this in the chat, is what have you noticed in the past week that was beautiful to you? Okay, what have you noticed in the past week that was beautiful to you? So let's share some of that, because in this time of what seems like increasing chaos and uncertainty, we can really lose that thread that there is, in fact, beauty still at work on us, through us, around us. And it's really up to us to take notice of it. So challenge yourself here. What have you noticed? Okay, I'll read some of them as they're coming through. Trees, generosity of humans, possibilities. My daughter buying me roses and chocolate-covered strawberries. Okay, great. Thank you for sharing those. Anyone else? Let's keep hearing them. There are many of us on the call here, so let's hear a few more. My oldest daughter just arrived unexpectedly from Hawaii. Rainbows in raindrops on spider webs. That's a nice image. An abundance of delicious mushrooms. The vibrant greens after rain. Sitting on my deck, looking at the beautiful trees, listening to the birds and other creatures, still, quiet, present. Butterflies and bees all over my buddleia. A yellow squash in my garden. On Friday, I went to the local farmer's market. For the first time this year, looking for fresh figs, I saw that some that were tiger striped. 3 baby hummingbirds in the nest in my garden. Gift of a 2007 Lexus from my son. My family. The beautiful abundance at the farmer's market. Okay, this is fantastic. And I want to point out something here that's in every one of these, which is these are things that are available to us in our everyday experience. It's not like somebody said the heavens opened and the chorus of angels poured forth. That's not what people are noticing is the beauty. Isn't that something? It's these little mundane everyday things which actually contain that same incredible seed and power of beauty, which brings us alive. And I'll just read the last one that came through. Stories of people helping people. Oh, and they're still coming, so I'll read just a couple more. New friends, along with catching up with some old friends. Health, the reminder that we have choice in how we respond to challenges. Okay, this is a great way to set the tone for today, because this is very much the energy and I would say the attitude that's needed in these times. So remember this sharing that we all just did, and remember your own experiences. Okay, Masami, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. It's a food for my cells, food for my soul, isn't it? I'm drinking all that up. So thank you for sharing that. And it's worth it to notice those little things. And then, like Chris said, it's really not about the oceans splitting in half so that you can walk through it, or the sky opens up and the whatever you believe in starts to sing to you. It doesn't need to be at that level. It's these little noticing. I think that's what really helps us to keep breathing in this moment, because you can't breathe for yesterday, you cannot breathe for tomorrow. So when you notice, you actually ground yourself each time, and you also elevate, you actually open your hearts. And I wanted to actually start today with actually grief, and right off the bat. And I think it's helpful that we did talk about the beauty. So, if I just started with the grief right off the bat, I think it might have been a little too much. But I wanted to bring this idea that the grief is a tenderizer in our bodies, in our systems. It tenderizes us. And speaking of thread, and I have a poem that may be towards the end. I didn't tell Chris about it, so I would need to send him. But there's a beautiful poem that is about you don't ever let go of the thread. And it's from William Stafford. It's called The Way It Is. It's the poem. If we have time, we will read it. But grief is kind of that thread that keeps us here. And, we do live in a culture that we don't want pain, right? We don't want to suffer. I'm always actually shocked to know how many people I work with, and even close friends, that will avoid pain. So, because in the medical system, I guess I'm not in the medical system that much. I really don't visit doctors. So I had no idea how much of that avoiding pain was being used as a slogan. And it's like, get ahead of the pain kind of thing. So to get ahead of the pain, you need to take painkillers, pain suppressants, right? But I think that's no longer working. Obviously, that's no longer working, right? Because we are all feeling this grief that kind of bubbles up from the ground up, from our own cells, but from this earth. But there's a power behind this grief, because grief will tenderize our heart center. I think a lot of us have not just experienced broken-heartedness, but hardening of our heart center. And sometimes when we get too hard, tenderizing events will begin to happen. Grief is a way of life, and to me, we don't want to get ahead of that or try to suppress it. I don't think that is our goal, and grief will be with you for the rest of your life. I know many of you here personally, because I've worked with you personally, your own challenges and grief. But that's what makes you wake up in the morning too. But that's what keeps you in bed sometimes too. And grief is the thread that keeps us together, actually holds us together, because we can relate to grief. And so I started to look around, even when my favorite store is Costco, right? So when I go to Costco, I look around And in the past, I have to be honest with you, I'll be like looking at their carts and thinking to myself, oh my gosh, why are they buying that? Maybe I should go say something to them, or I started to kind of, yeah, my judgmental like nutritional therapist starts to kick in, or my health intuitive kicks in and go, oh my gosh, I should probably approach this person and say, you want to do this instead of that, But I stopped in the recent years, stopped doing that completely. Chris will attest to this. And I've been walking around the month of August, especially since that tremendous fire of Maui, the island that I've visited many times. It was an island that my father absolutely loved. And I started to see these like grief. We're walking around with unprocessed, unheard, nobody has listened to you kind of a grief everywhere. So when somebody's like cutting me off on the streets, or I notice some kind of awkward behaviors or whatever, I just go, there's this grief. There's this grief, deep, deep grief that is underneath all this that we have never been able to talk about. And, I think we just don't have enough space to just come together and just cry. We're not allowed to cry. A lot of people even say to me, you're so, you know, brave, and thanks for being vulnerable. And for those of you that are on my Venus retrograde program, you know that I told you that it's nothing to do with me being vulnerable, because I don't feel vulnerable sharing my tears in public. I really don't. And it's helped me a lot to go through my layers and layers of grief. And so I would love for each and one of you to tap into that tenderizing energy of the grief a little bit more right now, particularly during this Mercury retrograde period, and find a friend. Okay, find a tree. It doesn't have to be other human being. That would just allow you to cry, allow you to completely go into silence for long periods of time, and that mountains or the trees or the flowers or your friend or your community will not ask you to rush through and to explain yourself, because we can't explain this grief, can we? I don't have words to actually describe the grief I feel, because I know that this grief isn't just mine, and it's not even my lifetime or my past lives either, because it's like I'm tapping into this thread, threads that we're all connected through the grief. And so instead of trying to get over my grief, I am really having that soften me, tenderize me like a piece of steak that needs that, my mom used to have to hammer those, tenderize those steaks because she couldn't afford to buy the filet mignon, right? So it's kind of like that's what's happening, breaking the fiber and the fascia. And so that's what I see a lot with what's happening in our bodies as well. And sometimes we're almost afraid to go diving into the tenderizing of that grief, because we don't know how deep this goes. And I don't know either. Sometimes I have no idea if there is a bottom to this. And in fact, I don't think so. I think it'll just go into the other areas. I don't know what's going to unfold. I don't know. Maybe the joy will come through it, like Khalil Gibran's poem, right? Joy and sorrow. The deeper you carve the sorrow, the deeper you can hold your joy. So maybe that's there. I don't know. But I think instead of looking for an end to grief, we really surrender in a way to grief and let grief inform us, let grief tie us together, connect us together, let grief lead our lives a little bit more and not be afraid of that. I think that might be the first stage in truly healing ourselves, because grief will help us come apart, and grief will help us unravel all of us. And that's what we've been trying to hold on to, artificially, believing that we're held together. I got this. I'm good. Earth is good. People are fine, but it's just unraveling in front of us. It's all coming apart. So maybe instead of wasting a lot of our energies towards holding up old structures and old way of doing things together, what if we just let this grief help us unravel? So I don't know the answer to what would happen after that, but the antidote to maybe what's going on might be for us to really, like a trust fall into the Indra's net of grief that maybe it's holding us together. So
Masami.
Chris, I will hand it over to you. It's just,
I
I just kind of, I wasn't planning on starting there, everyone. I didn't even really know where to start, to be honest with you, but that's where my heart wanted to start with. Yeah.
I just wanted to say I don't have a big point to make right here. It's just that we've been talking a lot lately about how much the appreciation of love and loving is, especially in the world that we're in today, as the level of chaos increases, that we need to really understand what that means in us as we engage with the world and we engage with others. And what you just said reminded me of, it was an idea that we came across it. I don't remember when exactly it was, not that long ago, but it was from a movie that wasn't particularly memorable. But there was a line in the movie that stood out, and it was about grief and how it connects to love. And it really, it's something that I think applies here very much. And it's the idea that grief is love that has nowhere to go, or maybe that it doesn't know quite where to go. And so that feeling of grief, especially when it's undefined, but it could be very much a personal level of grief and loss, that feeling of the love is still there, the feeling is still there, the expression wants to happen, but it doesn't know what form to take. And so it has that residual kind of heavy, unexpressed feeling in us. And that can do a lot of things. I mean, for those of you that have consciously traveled through a grieving process, that it's heavy. It's a weight. It's something that makes you want to pull back and withdraw into yourself. And so I just wanted to bring that into this conversation today, that there is a connection that's very real and is very alive in the grieving that does actually connect to our need to love and be loved, express lovingness through ourselves into the world and receive it. Yeah.
Chris, will you, after this one, I put it on the chat, the William Stafford's poem. Will you read that? And after that, if you can read the Ellen Bass's The Thing Is.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll put that one up. Okay, this poem by William Stafford, it's a pretty well-known piece. So some of you may know this one. The way it is. There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain about the thread, but it's hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread.
So it's, what you said, Chris, is that, grief might be the love that has nowhere to go. Maybe that's what the common thread is for all of us. Yeah.
Yeah.
And grief can truly be healed maybe by many different practices and breathing and meditating and writing about it, writing memoirs and all that. But maybe what holds all that together is you're giving grief, maybe you're giving love ways to express. you know. So maybe there's really no difference between grief and love. Yeah, we're just splitting hairs with that. So that's, maybe what I feel. And yeah, Chris, if you could share the screen and read that one.
So The Thing Is by Ellen Bass. To love life, to love it even when you have no stomach for it. And everything you've held dear crumbles like burnt paper in your hands. Your throat filled with the silt of it. When grief sits with you, it's tropical heat, thickening the air, heavy as water, more fit for gills than lungs. When grief weights you down, like your own flesh, only more of it, an obesity of grief, you think, how can a body withstand this? Then you hold life like a face between your palms. A plain face, no charming smile, no violet eyes. And you say, yes, I will take you. I will love you again. I'm going to read that last phrase. Then you hold life like a face between your palms, a plain face, no charming smile, no violet eyes, and you say, yes, I will take you. I will love you again. So we're right back in connecting this sense of beauty that we started with these everyday things that may not seem like anything special, and somehow giving voice to that sense of grief that we have, the feeling of losses that weigh on us. And I think if you can connect these dots, you can see that this is a way through that. This is a way forward by recognizing how beauty can be your guide and give expression to the love that's in you that connects you back to the world and to others.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So I'm going to shift a little bit to what you want to focus on possibly, or what to keep in your heart center during this Mercury retrograde. This one is very different. I don't know. Can you feel that this Mercury retrograde actually felt like the shadow period was harder than now? Yeah, I'm seeing nodding here. August 3rd is when the shadow period started. So, it's pretty much the entirety of the Venus retrograde that we've been crack opening our hearts and tenderizing our hearts the entire time. But the shadow period was quite demanding, and a lot of things were kind of hard to navigate. I was already experiencing a ton of electronic issues, computer issues, things being glitchy and all that. And I actually have never really quite welcomed the Mercury retrograde this much. Like, it just feels like, oh, thank God it's Mercury retrograde. Let's do this kind of a thing. But it's very, very gentle and it's slow. I heard that the Mercury is stationary in, I think, a Virgo, something like that. So maybe some of you can help me, but it's like it's in the right place, I guess. And I could feel, I don't know much about the planetary systems and things like that, but I could feel, I'm like, oh, wow, this just feels so much better. So I recommend you take full dive into this Mercury retrograde period, because we're going to have another one in December this year, right? So that one is going to be kind of a wrap up of all different Mercury retrogrades we've been through this year already. This one is a golden opportunity for all of us to notice the environment around you, within you, and really dig deeper into your internal voice and to listen to it, to hear it. So that requires you to create silence and stillness a little bit more. But this Mercury retrograde feels like there's like a support being provided from within. And this Mercury retrograde is very powerful in terms of you recognizing your own tools and potentials and things that you can tap into. It's going to really come up for you that you're like, oh, wow, I did not realize this was in me. It's like this level of strength and tools were already in me. So I think you will be able to discover that quite a bit. And one of the things that I would really recommend all of you to do during the Mercury retrograde, knowing that the common thread is that grief that we started talking about and that love that has nowhere to go kind of a thread. Notice that in each other and do what you can, if you can, every single day, okay, every single day to uplift someone other than you, okay, uplift someone other than you. If it means that you just crack a little smile, okay. It doesn't matter when you receive like a receipt from somebody at the shop, at the grocery stores or something. Instead of just taking it and leaving it like this, you receive it with both hands. That's a very Japanese thing to do, by the way. You honor the receiving side of it. I do think that the Mercury retrograde, but up to this point, I am seeing more and more of this great level of generosity, but also as equally great deal of stinginess. And we're just being kind of pulled apart. So really pay attention to that. There's this great need for your generosity, but there's this ton of holding back, not reaching out, not opening yourself to others. So see if you could do a little bit more of the uplifting side, gifting your smiles, gifting your compliments, gifting your generosities out there. That's not based on stinginess. Okay. Encourage others. Tell them that they matter. Tell them that what they're sharing matters, but their existence matter. And then that can be towards the nature, but also towards fellow human beings. I think what happens with a lot of us who feel deepest level of frequencies and energies, and you may call yourself the empaths or your channelers, or you could be highly sensitive persons, or the labels really do not matter to me at all, because I think the moment you label yourself, just as the quote goes, Kierkegaard says, the moment you label me, you negate me, right? So I don't like to label, but when we are extremely sensitive on top of a lot of sensitive stuff that's happening, we are very generous towards things that are non-human, let's say. Okay. But I think what we need right now is that generosity's open-heartedness towards one another, really one another. And I'm not saying that the humans matter more than other animals and other living beings. All sentient beings matter. But if you have a tendency to shut down from other human beings, and then you come back to maybe the immediate nature and animals, your pets and things, I encourage you for the next 3 weeks or so to uplift others, okay? Because we all can use that, but I think that will become very much of a source for you to energize your own inner being, okay? So that's one thing I wanted to say about the opportunity that we have right now to hold paradoxes as well, right? That I just mentioned here too. There's a great generosities, but then there's a great deal of hoarding that's going on, and see if you could find and navigate that a little bit differently. I just read a quote that was really sweet. It was something to do with the jump rope. You're like between jump ropes, like you're generous and then you're stingy and then you're fearful and then you're loving. We're kind of all doing this jump ropes together, right? And we're just hopping together. So know that that's what's happening. There's times you feel very joyful, and there are times you just are livid with what's going on. And it's okay as long as you're doing a jump rope. Okay. So you're not stuck. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to bring up something you've mentioned before, which was we talk about this a lot, but it's the idea of generosity. And there's this great way of looking at generosity from the Sufi tradition, which is that generosity is to share something that you also need. And so it's giving away something that you also need. And that's a great test of generosity. It's not just giving away what's left over that you don't want. That's not what that would be. It's the spirit of unselfishness. And that was another quote that I just came across this morning as we were talking about today's call. And it comes from Inayat Khan, and he said that unselfishness is the flame that illuminates the path. Unselfishness is the flame that illuminates the path. And that's very much what you're saying here, is that it's this need to see beyond ourselves and our immediate wants and fears, in particular our discomforts, the things that make us shrink into ourselves. And so that is a kind of unselfishness, is to open up to what lies beyond our protective barriers that we've put up for ourselves. That's a form of unselfishness, is to actually witness others that are going through what we talked about earlier, whether it's grief or loss or tragedy, whatever it might be, just change in general around you. That's a form of unselfishness, is to let it touch you. So just wanted to bring that in before we get any further.
Thank you. And to briefly talk about the physical challenges during the Mercury retrograde, and I will explain a little bit more of like what I have been seeing. But I think the shadow period is a very good time. Like, go back to that last 3 weeks or so. What are some of the challenges that have come up for you? Because that is going to be what you need to really address during this Mercury retrograde. So it's not a new thing. You know, we have a tendencies, I would say, even particularly in the maybe a Western mindset. I mean, I don't like to separate that because, you know, living in Japan and growing up there and then visiting there, I noticed that the mindsets are completely changing in the Eastern world too, towards consumerism as well. But what you have been going through in the last 3 weeks, they need to be revisited instead of looking for new things to think about, looking for new problems. Go back. What were you struggling with in the last 3 weeks, and then readdress that. Because the Mercury retrograde, particularly this one, is going to show you what you've been neglecting in your physical body, what you haven't been attending to, what are some of the things you've been ignoring. They have already shown up for you. They're not showing up as you go through the Mercury retrograde. They've already shown up for you. So stick with those. Come up with maybe 3. Those will be manageable, right? Because each week you could address the one thing. Maybe the following week you address the second thing. And by the time the 3rd week comes, you'll be actually, by addressing the first 2 things, the 3rd thing might resolve itself. Okay. So use this opportunity to do that. And what I'm seeing in my practice is that the willpower alone is no longer working. And this is something Chris and I talk about all the time in our courses and things. Stop the willpower. Okay. Willpower is you trying to lift the heavy grocery bags with your biceps. Okay. And then you just hold it as long as you can. Okay. Well, muscles are going to give up at some point. You know that, right? Okay. So somebody that's done a lot of body work, somatic work over the years, muscles will last about 90 seconds for holding that. And then eventually that'll turn into tendons and connective tissues, and you're going to start to injure yourself. Okay. So it's kind of like a willpower is like that. And I think, Chris, if you want to mention a little bit about the willpower, do you want to do that here?
Yeah, well, you mentioned the most important part of it, which is willpower is something that we've been trained to believe is the way to get through just about everything. You know, we just put our minds to it. We have phrases like this, you know, I'm just going to put my head down and just push through. And it's fine. I mean, willpower is important, but the thing about it, like Masami said, is it's finite. We only have so much of it. And the thing is, we use our willpower both to do things and also not to do things that we don't want to do. And so we usually aren't even paying that much attention. And so one of the reasons why willpower is such an important thing is that because we are in times of change, which means that change is required of us, in order to make the adaptations that are needed. And we don't even know what all those changes are. But there's this whole range of ways that we respond that we need to be aware of. Willpower is one. Another one, just very quickly, would be habits that we have formed. We may or may not be aware of those habits. Habits are very powerful movers of our behavior, but some of them happen over time and repetition, and then we forget about them. Another one is choice. And choice is something that we all believe we have an abundance of. But the fact is, even choice is a limiting factor in our change, in our adaptability, because we can only make choices based on what we know, what we believe, what we've experienced. And if we haven't known or believed or experienced something, it's very unlikely that we can make a choice for it or against it. So we have to also learn. That's implied there with choice. We have to keep learning so that we can make choices that are beneficial. And then another one I want to mention, because these four things all go together in us psychologically in our makeup, and that is the beliefs and mindset that we hold, because those are essentially the tunnel, the funnel. It's the way that we see the world, the goggles that we look at the world through. And so we have to, at some level, become aware of, why are we thinking we need to exercise willpower? Why are we making choices? What are the habits we're cultivating? Because if they're not guided by something, or if we can't see what is guiding them, our beliefs, for example, or the mindset we may not be aware of, then we're just on autopilot. We're just being influenced by whatever washes through our day. So to be very conscious about cultivating these very powerful factors, again, choice, habit, willpower, mindset. And mindset, again, is just how you look. It's your outward look. It's the way that you look at situations as they arise. And Masami, I'm really quick, if you don't mind, I'm going to share this. This is a very famous quote that I would guess everyone on here has heard before. If I can get my screen to move forward, I might have to just read it because it's not cooperating. Oh, maybe it is now. Okay. It's from Viktor Frankel, and it's something that he's probably one of the most famous people to talk about resilience and adapting to change, because he survived the horrors of Auschwitz as a self-admittedly very frail person, as a very frail body, and he made it through this horrific experience. And he came away with this phrase, which he put in one of his books later. And he says, between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our responses lies our growth and our freedom. So he's getting at the mindset piece here. And he actually called this very situation, he called this the last freedom. The last freedom. This is the one that we have when everything else gets taken away. It's this choice, and it is a choice, and it is a mindset, and it requires willpower, and we can make it take on the force of habit if we exercise it. But it's to choose in that space between stimulus and response. When something happens, and before we express something outward, that we actually choose how that response is going to be shaped. And that's the freedom that we have. That's where our growth edge lies. So I just wanted to remind everyone of that.
All right. Well, I am moving, looking at the time, I'm moving to the physical challenges that I've mentioned, go back to the 3 weeks prior to this time. That's going to be very important. And physical symptoms that I was tuning into it, as well as like the collective, as well as my individual clients that I've been working with, especially in the last month or so. And you know me, I love using like something that starts with certain letter of alphabet kind of thing. And it just kind of came to me. But one is fatigue. Second is fog, meaning brain fog. And then a third one is fungus. Okay. Fungus and yeast. That's hugely starting to become a problem here. Fatigue, fog, brain fog, and fungus and yeast. And psychologically, what I'm seeing is feeling off, like I just don't feel right. Okay. Vaguely off, to fear of your own fate. So lots of different fears, fear of falling behind, fear of never finding my calling, fear of never feeling fulfilled. I mean, you name it. So there's the physically, lots of fatigue, and that's showing up in lack of sleep a lot right now. Not sleeping through the night is something that I'm seeing a lot, and that can be stemming from the adrenal being too stimulated to the point that is underperforming. That's what low adrenal functions mean, right? That they got too overly stimulated, overworked. Seeing that in more and more younger generations as well. So I think rubbing that region of the lower back using your hands and your even like creating fists and just rubbing that area can be very, very helpful. Things that are helpful for adrenals. Number one is that you've got to stop eating foods that are white sugar oriented, lots of carbohydrates, breads, pastas, bunch of rice, and then eating chocolates and cakes afterwards kind of thing. I'm assuming no one is doing that here because you know how detrimental that is. But here's the vicious circle. When you're fatigued and when you're exhausted and when you got the brain fog and you got the fungus overgrowth, guess what you want to eat? More sugar, right? Fungus and yeast, they feed off of sugar. Brain fog, you can get a little bit of glucose energy because you put eat sugar. And fatigue can be not eliminated, but artificially you can tap into energy when you give yourself glucose. So there's that weird stuff going on right now. Okay. So during the Mercury retrograde, I think that's been happening to us pre-retrograde. So now is the time. Okay. Maybe you address your fatigue the first week and say, okay, I'm going to do a better job going to bed. Even I cannot fall asleep. I'm just going to lie down there. Okay. And just rest my body horizontally. Okay. Things like that. And the fungus and yeast stuff, if you go to the regular medical fields, like a regular doctors, they will probably give you cortisone and steroid creams to suppress those overgrowth or expressions of them. But they will just drive those fungus and yeast further into the cells, and then they become stronger and they'll come back up even stronger than ever. So some of the things that you may want to kind of go back and use are good old orange colored iodine, actually. Go to local grocery stores, or drugstores, wherever. Find those old-fashioned orange iodine that you used to have in your medicine cabinet. Okay, those work better than anything in terms of antifungal and yeast. And also, most of the time, people are very low on zinc, and that zinc can be a great way to combat the fungus and yeast also. Okay. And when you don't get enough zinc, you are going to inevitably crave sugar. So here we go again, right? And the brain fog is seems like a tough thing to do, but if you're not sleeping and you're eating a bunch of sugar, well, good luck to, having a really healthy brain, right? Brain is basically it's just kind of showing what's out of balance inside you. Okay. And a lot of our brains are actually feel like on fire to me. It's very inflamed in the brain. And one of the things that you want to look into to lower the inflammation of the brain, because brain fog is an inflammation, look into things that will quiet down or dampen that inflammation. And I'll just give you a couple of things that I think will be really worth looking at. Is one is the fish oil is really good. So omega-3s are good. If you could get omega-3s from even like oils like flaxseed oil kind of thing would be great. The phosphatidylserine is really, really great for brain inflammation as well. So things like that, please do look into that. And obviously you got to take care of the rest of you, right? Gut health as well. So I think the heart center's been really, really worked at right now through the Venus retrograde. And now it feels like it's moving to some other rigid areas. That's why I sense more of a brain issues coming up. And psychologically, the moon's mood swings are pretty big right now. Mood swings one day to another, good days, bad days. Okay. And, I think it's really worth it for us to get real with the fact that forever chemicals like PFAS, those are really in our municipal waters. 45% to 50% of our tap water could be contaminated, is what the government's telling us. But with the forever chemicals, it is contaminated, everyone. So please do something about the water that you're drinking. It's no longer you can just trust the reports that come from your municipal waters or even the well water. You've got to check your well water, right? And one really sad findings that just came out is that now officially, I believe this might be in the United States, but it's 1 in 36 kids have autism, spectrum of autism now. So, we went from when I was a child in the United States, I think a 1 in we're talking 10,000 kids, something like that, to now 1 in 36. So there's something really chemically going wrong here, right? And it's important that you don't close your eyes and close your ears and close your mouth and never talk about it. I didn't hear that. No, I didn't see that report. We've got to stop that. You really got to see the reality of what's happening here. And this goes to my reflections of just, I'm not going to go into huge details here, but my sense of globally what's going on, so many losses and challenges. And, it's not just the Lahaina fire, but there are many, many fires all across the globe, to flooding and so on and so forth. But what I sense is that what's inside is what's outside is reflecting back to the inside. And there are these imbalances in our own bodies, particularly when it comes to the 5 elements. So the wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. There are these 5 elements that are supposed to be kind of working together. And it's actually in that order, everyone: wood, fire, earth, metal, water. Things are not linear, but it's easier if you can kind of combine the 5 elements in that sense. So you want to look at what are some of the wood elements in me? What are the fire elements in me? What's out of balance in my earthly being? You can look at it from a chakra systems or organs. And I'm going to include the link to the YouTube. When I send you the recording of this, I will send you the YouTube that I did for Earth Day, where I went into more details about these 5 elements. So you can just listen to that. But I feel like these imbalances have been calling out to you. But the alarm system, just like what happened in Lahaina, alarm system is no longer working, perhaps, or you're not hearing the alarm systems from within. So it's not just the external alarm system that didn't work, particularly with the fire in Maui, but also, is your internal alarm system working? That's a question that you need to answer on your own. And the alarm system should be working. And some of the alarm systems from within will show up as those F's that I just mentioned. The brain fog, it's the fungal and yeast overgrowth, and it's the fatigue, and it's feeling off. I mean, those are all the internal alarm systems, and that should be going off. Okay. So that's another thing I wanted to mention. And, I feel along the subject of this reflection on what's going on all across the globe is this idea that I was thinking about it. In Japanese, there's this word called on. You pronounce it as on, but spelled as O-N, like on. Okay, but we pronounce it as on. And it's a key tenet, I think that's how you say it, but it's a principle or the belief of Japanese ethics that signifies a sense of moral indebtedness. Indebtedness. On means you're indebted to something. We owe gratitudes to this earth, but we assume that we own this earth, right? We get to take over this earth. We also are indebted to this body, but we, as in, I don't know, maybe little s self, feels like, well, this body should be operating just fine because it's a machine, right? We don't sense this on. On is this indebtedness. It's very humbling to know that you're being gifted and you're allowed to exist. You're not just existing because your willpower made you exist, okay? But you're being gifted. You're being given the chance to be here. That's what on means. There's a great deal of generosities behind us being here right now. And I couldn't help it but to think of the book many of you have read that came out as a children's book in 1964, The Giving Tree. And if you've never read the book, The Giving Tree, I recommend you do again. And how heartbreaking that book was and is. And how that's kind of like the teachings that we actually need to go back and reread. It's not always ending the story with the happy thoughts and ascension and chasing light and being addicted to light, but it is really go back to read that book. How much of this tree has to give to us? How much of this earth has to give to us? And I couldn't help it but to think of that great big trees, that conglomerate of trees in Maui, the Bodhi tree, that glorious tree that blessed so many of us that are not from there but have visited and that do live there and have lost their lives. That tree has given us the shades, has given us the breeze, gentle breeze, has given us the time to rest under and to recoup, And the island of Maui, to me, is very symbolic in so many ways, because many of us, the Maui's economy has been sustained mostly, over 50% is sustained by the tourism and also the plantation of the sugarcane plantation, right? And then handful of people that own the great deal of the land there that are, hoarding the land, right? When you look at that little island and you look at what's going on there, it just almost kind of like a reflection of what's going on in the rest of the world. And that island has given us a lot, whether you have visited that place or not, which I have, and I have received a lot. You don't go to an island like Maui to do more. You know what I mean? You go there to heal, right? You go there because you were exhausted. You go there for rest and receive and recoup, right? That's what you go there for. So there's a lot of like a great level of taking that we have done, including myself. I've gone there to gain more strength. I've gone there to receive more. And it's like the island has shown us this unbelievable level of consumerism and the greediness and the capitalism. So that's one thing I wanted to, mention. And even though I'm going to use this word very, very carefully, it is an opportunity to rebuild Lahaina with a greater spiritual awareness and building that with a different kind of a mindset. And that seems like that place needs, like the fields of the land needs to go into fallow, to rest, to pause. That island also needs that. But what I want you to think about is that go past the mindset that is just about that island. That is showing up everywhere. And in many of us also. And many of us that have spent the last, 3+ years giving also, especially through the pandemic and all that, is to show up and hold the space. I think there's a lot of fatigue. There's a deep sense of exhaustion around the concept of kind of a one-way giving also. And I think that's showing up on the lands as well. And the last thought that I have about this is that maybe two things, but my deepest prayer and wish for those of you in Lahaina and other parts of the world as you continue to rebuild that land is to take it slowly as much as you can, speak to the spirits of that land, speak to the ancestors, speak to the stars, speak to the planetary needs, because the planets are your elders and the stars are your ancestors. So we got to speak to both the stars and the planets' needs to rebuild that. And I can't help it, when I see those images from the above of what happened in Lahaina, you can imagine that makes me think of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And it took a long time to build those places back up. And the people of those lands got together and they decided to keep some of these burnt down, obliterate, is that the word, Chris?
Obliterated.
Yeah, land and those structures, and they decided to keep them as a symbol of never, ever forget. So I think we're at the point that it's not just about do not forget, but we also need to tap into remembering. And that remembering side is where I was tapping into the Miyazaki's film. Many of you know Miyazaki's films, the Japanese animated films, but there's one that's called Spirited Away. And the movie Spirited Away came out, I think, 2002. If you have Amazon Prime, or you can even watch it on YouTube and things like that, but it's called Spirited Away. The gist of the story is that the people basically turn into highly consuming, obese pigs. The characters turn to pigs and they just eat and eat and eat, never feeling satiated. And there's this wise old woman that comes into this storyline. That's the thread. And the story's purpose is to have us pause and to remember that we are being supported by the stars of the ancestors, and you will also become the star at some point. You will add your light to that night skies, and then that you are being held and based on that Japanese word on by this earth, which is our elders. So let's not lose that. Let's not forget that. Let's remember that. So all of us don't turn into this greedy, consuming, spirited away pigs. Okay. So that's something I wanted to mention. And the 3 practices, because I mentioned that I will share some Japanese wisdom on the 3 practices, habits that will change and shift your own, maybe small, but your environment. So one thing I want you to think about is entrance and exits. Okay. For those of you that have been with me, you know long enough to know that the entrance and exits are the key. That also means that what enters into you and what exits out of you also matters. What you take in and what you spew out, okay, or what you speak out, or what you even think. That's important. But in the household wise, where you live, the most important place that you must attend to, and I mean every single day, okay? And when I used to see clients at my home, some of my clients would arrive a little early and they would just always be laughing at me and say, why do you sweep and dry sweep and, use water and salt to clean your front door and front entrance every day? Well, that's because you don't know which gods are going to knock on my door today. And my home has to be ready for the guests. Like the Rumi's poem, right? Guests are arriving and I don't know what they're going to need, but I need to have my entrance ready to welcome the guests. And a guest could be grief. Guests can be joy. Guests can be loving actions. Guests can be a stormy weather. I don't know, but we need to be ready for that. So that's the entrance. And the exit, this may surprise you, is where you poop. Okay, it's where you poop. It's your toilet. Toilet must be cleaned every single day. If you don't use your toilet that day, you don't need to clean it, okay? But if you or planning on it and you did use it that day, which I hope you do, you must clean your toilet. Around it, surface, everything. Toilets for most people's homes, I'm assuming, they're white, right? Unless you have a golden toilet, good for you. Okay. Or you may have a pink toilet like we used to have because we bought a 1950s home. Okay. But in most cases, it's a white toilet, right? So it shows how clean or how not clean that is. How perfect is that? So please wipe down your toilet seats. Please lift the toilet seat and look at the back. Okay. If your entrance and your exits are dirty and congested, no other actions of you decorating your house with expensive crystals or incense or chanting through your house with your drums are going to do anything for you because you don't have the entrance and the exits that can flow the chi and the prana freely. Okay. And the last thing, the third thing is that in Japanese culture, we use salts a lot. So to clean the front door, maybe the entrance, the threshold of the doorway is very important because that is the liminal space. Okay. You go from the outside world to the inside world, knowing to maybe knowing, but there is this threshold, maybe knowing to not knowing, or from the inside to outside, knowing space to not knowing space. But that is the liminal threshold. The threshold needs to be cleaned with mostly water, purified water, with just maybe a teaspoon of sea salt of your choice. Okay. Just mix a little bit of sea salt. You could use a little vinegar and things too and clean, that's fine. But the salt has been known to purify. This is why if you've ever watched a sumo wrestling match in Japan, they will throw the salt into the space that they are going to come together with your opponent. Why do we do that? Because we're purifying that space. Okay. I have used salts to make the neighborhood more like a beautiful connecting space. And that has worked many times for me. I will go around my four corners of my house, putting a little pile of salt. And I have a plate of salt that I will clean it out once it hardens, and I'll put it in my front area also. So use those things if you can. Salts, purified water, but the entrance and exits. Okay. That also means your entrance and your exit, right? Your internal body needs to be looked at also. Okay. So make sure you're hydrated, make sure you're eliminating, make sure what comes into your mouth is nourishing to your own house, your home. Okay. So I think those are some of the things I wanted to mention, and then we'll go for another 15 minutes and we'll wrap up. But Chris, do you have anything else to add? Maybe we could take a couple of Q&A if there are any.
Well, I think what you're saying is very much about the topic for today's call was owning your power. And you've talked about this in a number of ways indirectly. And I think that if we can put together all of these threads about what does it mean to be in your power, and especially at this time when we're using this Mercury retrograde as the frame to hold this conversation, because this is a time where a lot of things get a bit more chaotic. And so how can you stay in your power, and what is your power? And we're talking about all these ways you can pay attention and observe. You know, Masami just mentioned these 3 practices which are very much about being aware of your environment, internally and externally. Ways that we talked about with the willpower and the choice and the habits and the mindset. These are all ways that you can engage. The Viktor Frankel quote of being aware of that space between something that happens, the stimulus, and then our responses to it. Those are ways that we can be in our power. And Masami, I had one last quote that I wanted to throw in there from Inayakon, if there's time. If you'd like to say something else first.
Yeah, I will say a couple of things here. So, coming back to the living in the paradox as well, this morning I was reminded of this coming Monday, August 28th, is when Martin Luther King did that very famous speech 60 years ago, 1963, I have a dream. Okay. And so I was just sitting with that and reading that speech of I Have a Dream. And that speech was done just around 100 years after President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing the slaves, right? So that took another 100 years, okay, at the same spot. And I wonder what is ahead of us in terms of our speech. What is our speech from this point forward? Martin Luther King was describing his vision of America. So what is our vision of the world? Let's say another 40 years from now, what would that look like? And then also I was reminded of the kind of the thread that connected everyone during that march to Washington, D.C. There were a lot of musicians, like Bob Dylan played multiple songs and things like that too. But the one was the gospel that said, "We shall overcome." Right. So I was kind of humming that, "We shall overcome." So I was singing that this morning as I was preparing, drinking my coffee and things like that. And then I thought to myself, and I asked Chris, I said, what do you think our anthem is going to be? What do you think the song that we will be singing as we march forward into this world right now? And Chris jokingly said, "I will survive." And I thought, okay, well, that's funny, but I would love to see it more than we would just survive. But maybe that's what we will have to do for a little while, So that's a question for you. I would love to, hear about it. Maybe think about it a little bit, maybe before you answer. Just think about it, feel into it, let your heart tenderize with the grief that it's connecting all of us, and see what would come of our anthem. And one last thing is that I always try to remember that the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. So we're being called to action. And it may be that you take actions with your entrance and in your exits. Okay. Maybe you take actions to uplift one person today. I don't know. I don't really know exactly what you will do, but I encourage myself as well to not stay in that point of indifference, because that is not love. Okay. That is the opposite of love. So that's what I wanted to share. And let's get to Inayat Khan's quote, Chris.
Yeah, and really quick, Dr. King, I love that. Just a little tidbit of history is that when he gave that speech that is so famous now, most of that was actually spontaneous. The part that we know of as the I Have a Dream speech, he actually stopped sharing his prepared speech, which was only supposed to be about 4 minutes long, and he ended up just speaking from his heart. And what's amazing is that he started out by saying, "And so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream." We have to remember that, because we're there now. Whatever those difficulties might be, we have to persevere through that. So let me just share this final very rich quote. It's short, but it is packed full of depth. So destiny is not what is already made. Destiny is what we are making. Destiny is not what is already made. Destiny is what we are making. Let that sink in, because this is really the essence of this owning your power, is to recognize the depth of this phrase here, that you are not simply a victim of circumstance. Things happen that are out of our direct control, yes. But every little thing that we do, think, say, express, don't express, builds something that affects our future experience and the future experience of everyone and everything around us. And we're all doing this at the same time. So this to me is an invitation to really, really recognize how our creative potential can work to create the world of our dreams, like Dr. King spoke of in his speech, or is it creating the world of our fears and the one that makes us want to go and just hide away? And it's what we are making that will happen. What we are making right now is what will make that happen, whatever it is.
Chris, will you, before you close that, will you read the Agatha Christie's quote as well?
Sure. Let me pull that up.
And then I wanted to read my favorite haiku. So
okay, couple more sharings.
yeah, and then because we got just a couple more minutes. So
okay, Agatha Christie. So if you don't know Agatha Christie, she's the very famous mystery writer. And she said, and this was much later in her life when she said this, and I think she lived well into her 90s, if I remember correctly. But she said, I like living. I like living. I have sometimes been wildly, despairingly, acutely miserable, racked with sorrow. But through it all, I still know quite certainly that just to be alive is a grand thing. Just to be alive is a grand thing. And I'm going to go back to this haiku from Masami. You can read this one.
yeah, so I will read it in Japanese first, or from my memory. But so it goes, 暗焼けて触るものなき月見かな。暗焼けて触るものなき月見かな。So this haiku means my storehouse burnt down. Now I can see the moon. My storehouse burnt down. Now I can see the moon. And like I said, if the stars and the planets have connections to our ancestors and our elders, this is our chance, everyone. This is our grand, great, golden opportunity to actually see the moon, what illuminates us. And this is, I don't want to be someone that is sitting in Colorado talking about what's happening somewhere other than where I live. But at the same time, my deepest wish and deepest prayer for all of you that have lost so much, and it is not just the fire in Maui, but so many losses right now, is to find ways to connect with our ancestors, to connect with our elders, to remember, so we don't become this greedy pigs, the insatiable hunger. And we have to send love and energy towards like protecting people that have lost so much from these greedy energies coming in to take over that precious, beautiful lands. Because I'm sure many of you have been hearing that companies like, what's that?
BlackRock is the one we heard.
BlackRock, yeah. And other real estate developments companies, they're calling people in Maui, basically saying, I'll buy your land up so we can put a giant building there for you, right? That's already happening. So let's do what we can for them as well, okay? And so that they can see the moon too. Eventually we can all lift our heads up and notice that there's that moon illuminating us deeply from the inside out. But it's hard to see the moon. That's why when I read that haiku, I pause for the longest time after my storehouse burnt down. I paused for the longest time because that pause may last you 2 decades. And in fact, my storehouse burnt down also 6 years ago. Or was it 7 years ago? Sorry. Was it? I can't even remember. Was it 6 years ago? 7 years ago. That's right. And my brother from Japan is coming tomorrow that I have not seen since our storehouse burnt down with the earthquakes. And it's a mixed feelings, because I don't know my brother very well, but both of us have kind of sat in that my storehouse burnt down for 7 years. And then I'm hoping when I hold my brother's hands, I can lift my head up and see the moon. It might take that long, everyone. But time is not linear. So let's stay steady with it. Let's stay with it. And let's not rush through this. Because we rush through, we don't hear each other. Because we are moving so fast, we don't listen to the greater needs of the land itself. We've got to slow down. So if your life is still in my storehouse burnt down level, stay with it. Stay with it. You don't need to lift your head up yet to look at the moon. The moon will illuminate when it's always illuminating, and you will notice it when you need to. So that's where you have to be kind and generous with yourself. Be generous, uplifting with you. Okay. Yeah. All right. So any thoughts? Thank you, everybody, for your quotes. Lovely, lovely. You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you, Masami and Chris, and networking energy of all bring humanity together. Yeah. Why don't we all take a moment? And Chris, if you want to read some of them, it's fine. But I'd like to take just a kind of a moment of silence. I don't need to guide you into any meditation. You know how to tap in. So let's just breathe out first, release any stagnations, like you're blowing a candlelight. It's your birthday, everyone. It's everybody's birthday today. Yeah. Blow your candles, as many as you want to put candles on, because this isn't the only time you've been here before. Okay. I'm going to put 700 candles in front of me and blow all of it up. Okay. And then gently begin to sip on the breaths. Know that your breath is a gift that's given to you. And then when you breathe out, be sure to filter that out through not only your lungs, but through your heart center. And as you breathe out, see if you can uplift one person that you saw on the screen today, one person on this community that you saw that left a little bit of an impression in the back of your eyes somewhere. Breathe that purified, filtered, beautiful breath towards that person. Energize. Prana means breath. On your own, 3 more breaths on your own. And pause at the last exhale and just hold that nothingness, stillness. And as you take the inhale back in Come back to the space. All right. Thank you. Yes, you're welcome, everyone. You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for your generous thank yous. It means a lot to both of us. It really does.
It does. And Masami, it's funny, I keep forgetting to do this, but I wanted to mention about the QST before we jump off, because I keep forgetting to say it. For those of you, some of you have done this, actually several of you on this call have done this, but I wanted you all to know that I'm offering a special 25% off the regular price for the quantum sound therapy that I'm offering. And if you want something to help fortify you as you're going through this process of just kind of experiencing the tumult and the turmoil that's going on internally and externally, especially through this Mercury retrograde period, I'm doing a special pricing through September 15th. So if you book a session with me between now and September 15th, you can take advantage of that special price. And I'll put the link in the chat right here for
Well,
those.
and then when we send out the replay,
yeah, we'll send out more information.
Shirley, will you send me this poem to me in the email so I can include that too in the replay video as well? That'll be great. Any last minute questions, anyone? Any thoughts that you just have to get out of your heart center? Please raise your hand. You could wave at me if you need to. Don't be shy. It's easier said than done, isn't it? It can be tough to speak up, but if you do let us know. You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for the rainbows and hearts and namaste signs, and thank you both for so much. This community and space makes all the difference. You are both amazing. Thank you. I think it's let's just, if you could remember the word on, O-N, just when you turn on your light switch, remember that word in Japanese, on, the indebtedness. Okay. It sounds really grim, but it's not. It's that you are being you're being allowed to live, but you are having the prana blown into you so you get to breathe. That's what's happening every day. So when you turn on that light switch, please do remember that. Okay. I'm going to ask Alex to unmute. Thank you, everyone. If you need to go, I know we've been keeping you long. So go ahead, Alex.
Hi, Masami and Chris and everyone. I just wanted to go back to the grief, and that actually grief brings a lot of love and a lot of support. And there was a brilliant animation called Inside Out. It's supposed to be for kids, but actually it's for grown-ups as well. And really, grief is the thing that connects us so much.
Alex, will you email me that too, that link of the animation?
I will try to find it, but it's a movie, and it is called Inside Out.
Okay, so it's a movie. Okay,
it's beautiful.
I will find a link, and then I will put that as an addition to when we send you the link for today's video. So, all right, thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Anybody else that would love to share? I hope you were able to breathe the prana into someone today in this call, someone that you saw. Yeah, it was hard for me to choose one person. I actually chose all of you. Yeah, I couldn't decide to just do one person. So I hope you all felt it. Okay, so I think we will wrap up for today. Thank you for being here. We got this, okay? But we will come up with our own anthem at some point, I think. We don't know. I don't know what it is yet. We shall overcome first, yes, and then we will survive. And then let's hope maybe we'll have another song. Maybe our future generation will come up with a song for us. We don't know. But the next generation is really taking the torch forward for us too. So.
And Masami, really quick, Yvette actually mentioned something important, which is that C-SPAN is running the March on Washington footage. So if you'd like to see that, I think you can look at it online, or if you have cable, it's available in several different formats on websites as well. So you can look that up, and I'm going to say thank you again.
Thank you, everyone. Yes, take care of yourself. Bye-bye.